3 p.m. tonight, and I will call this meeting to order. Before I do so, does the general manager have any initial remarks?
Certainly, I'd like to make some housekeeping remarks. Firstly, can everybody hear me? Good, excellent. Good evening. On behalf of the ACWD Board of Directors, I would like to welcome the public's participation in this board meeting this evening. My name is Robert Shaver, and I serve as the district's general manager. Members of the public may participate in this public meeting either by using the Zoom application or by telephone. If you're participating by Zoom, generally we ask that all participants mute their microphones unless speaking. You may also be placed on mute by the district secretary. The district secretary will unmute participants at the appropriate time when the board is receiving public comments. In Zoom, you will be able to view presentation materials as they are presented to the board, and at any time you may submit a question or raise your hand. If you're muted, you do that in the Zoom app, and you would like to address the board. If you're participating by telephone, please put your phone on mute to assure the best sound quality for everyone, and refrain from making comments until prompted by either the district secretary or the board president. Zoom allows you to use your dial pad, *6 to mute, unmute, and *9 to raise your hand. You may download presentation slides from the district's website, which is at www.acwd.org, and follow along any presentations that way. This Zoom webinar will be recorded and will be made accessible to the public for future viewing. Lastly, the board has 3 closed session items this evening that will be covered at the end of the meeting. While the board convenes privately in closed session, members of the public may remain logged in to the Zoom application or stay on the phone to be informed of any board reports once the closed sessions are concluded. Again, we thank you all for attending. That's it, President Akbari.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver. Can the district secretary please take roll call?
Sure. Directors Weed.
Here.
Gunther.
Here.
Wong.
Here.
Sethi. Director Sethi.
Sorry, here.
And President Akbari.
Here. Thank you. Director Huang, do you want to lead us in the salute to the flag, please?
My pleasure. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Director Huang. We'll now move on to item number 3, public comments. Members of the public may address the board on any issues not listed on the agenda, which are within the purview of the Alameda County Water District. A 5-minute limit is customary. However, the board president may adjust the actual time allotted to accommodate the number of speakers. Members of the public who wish to address the board on a scheduled agenda item will be given the opportunity to do so when we get to that agenda item. Is there any member of the public who wishes to make a comment? Seeing or hearing none, we will move on to item number 4, to consent calendar. Are there any motions to add items to the consent calendar?
I'll go ahead and move, we add items 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3 to the consent calendar.
If I could ask, I'd like to make a comment on 5.3, if I could. So
Okay, I'll just add 5.1 and 5.2.
I'll second.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Directors Weed.
no, okay. Yes, I'm sorry.
Directors Weed.
Aye.
Gunther.
Aye.
Wong.
Aye.
Sethi.
Aye.
And Akbari.
Are there any motions to adopt the consent calendar as amended?
Also move John Weed.
Sorry, Gina, was there a question?
I didn't hear your response when I called your name, Director.
Oh, sorry, aye.
Thank you.
Apologize for that. Is there a motion to adopt the consent calendar as amended?
I'll move as amended.
Second.
Great. Roll call, please.
Directors Weed,
Aye.
Gunther,
All right,
Wong,
Aye.
Steffi,
Aye.
and Akbari.
Aye. With that, we will move on to item 5.3, and I'll turn it over to the general manager.
Thank you. Item 5.3 involves a resolution adopting a mitigated negative declaration and mitigation monitoring and reporting program and approving the Avalon Tank Hillside Slope Erosion Protection Project. And we're happy to make a small presentation, a quick presentation on this item, if so desired.
I asked that it be removed. No need for a presentation. The question I have are procedural, and they relate in part to one technical issue on seismic. I guess the key question is, why are we going through the EIR process when this trace a draft negative declaration for a maintenance project and not new construction?
Yeah, Director Weed, to be clear, this is a mitigated negative declaration, so it's far less involved than an environmental impact report or EIR. And this wouldn't be strictly maintenance. Here we're constructing new slope stability or erosion prevention measures, including doing some concrete work, Shot Creek, on the existing hillside, and also constructing some concrete head walls and some other improvements, stairs and other access and safety improvements. So it wouldn't be just strictly a maintenance project. And then also it is in the urban wildland interface. And it also involves habitat of some federally listed species. And so in order to ensure that we were compliant with CEQA, we conducted the mitigated negative declaration.
Okay, but it's within the fenced area of the original project. And one, I guess, could argue that it's a robust maintaining of a slope. So that would be the one issue. The second comes into that is not the entire hillside moving along that section above 680 in the south part of the town. And is this, so will we be back again later as this thing continues to come down the hill?
Well, certainly there are areas up in the Avalon development that have had issues primarily due to erosion and slope stability. Below the tank and around the tank site, I'm not aware of any. I can't say what will happen in the future, but I'm not aware of any issues surrounding the tank site other than the hillside erosion issues behind the tank, which are to be addressed by this project.
Okay, if you drove along 680, they've had to rebuild it on at least one occasion because the slumping of the entire hillside and the impact on the South Bay Aqueduct is clear there. So that was the other. Next on seismic, these are more of a technical point that there's another version in 1997, the Uniform Building Code had an attachment to it, which is Fremont has adopted, that talks about near source shaking from faults, and particularly the Mission fault. Second, in 2009, the Warm Springs fault, which I believe is remarkably close to the site, was determined as being possibly active. It's taken off the inactive pre-Holocene levels. So from just general seismic issues, I'd encourage us to be aware of those two documents and make sure that our consultants are aware of them.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Stevenson, this is Paul Sethi.
Yeah.
I wasn't planning on pulling this item, but since Director Weed has, let me ask a couple of questions here. As far as my recollection is, this is like the third time in a dozen years that we are doing substantive repairs up there at the Avalon tank. And each time it's costing us quite a bit of money. and I have a concern about that. And I'm wondering whether we are studying the previous efforts to try and do a much better job of stabilization behind the tank. I did go through the board materials, the site survey, the engineering materials. So I can see what we're doing here, but it does concern me that, every 3 or 4 years, we're going back and having to do work there.
Yeah, your memory serves you correctly, Director Sethi. So we have been having to address about every other year erosion issues along that hillside. We've not done a comprehensive reconstruction or protection project geotechnically engineered until now. Essentially, this is a fairly costly project. We did program it into our CIP a few years ago. And so this project is meant to resolve those ongoing issues we've had up there. You're right, we have done a few projects, actually 2 projects up there to sort of temporarily stabilize the slope over the past 4 years. Those mostly involved essentially tarping the slope and doing some more minor drainage ditch repairs and restoration. This project is intended to resolve those issues entirely.
And
Okay,
if I may,
thank you. I hope we're successful with it.
so do I. Really, the problems with this facility started in the El Nino year, and I believe it was 1998 when we had the massive amount of precipitation. Remember those, the good old days when we used to get massive amounts of precipitation? And Mr. Stevenson is correct. We've taken some interim measures. Mr. Stevenson, I think the Engineering and Information Technology Committee would love to have a committee meeting up there so that you could show the committee members what's going on up at that site. And I believe Director Sethi is on that committee.
Yes.
I think legal and legislation would need to get up there and take a look at this.
I think there might be some interest. We can work with directors to allow you to go up there and take a look at the facility. The tank itself has never been in any danger. I just want to make that clear. The tank is built on rock in a cut into the hillside. The erosion sloughing issues have been on one side of the tank where there is a significant amount of soil that overlays the rock, but the tank itself has never been in any danger.
Sean, I do remember the comment made when they built the Avalon development, they wanted to put a golf course in. And it was going to be a dynamic golf course. Each year there would be a different lie on the tees and holes because the hillside was in movement. So
I assure you the tank remains level.
thank you.
And John, they were even planning on putting a pond there, so that the pond was moving.
And I'm just going to say that actually staff has been keeping the engineering IT committee, I think, or is it capital and ops? Can't quite remember which committee. I've been hearing all the updates. So actually every time there's a project, staff actually provide really good detailed presentation at a committee meeting. So thank you.
Thank you. And it is the Engineering and IT Committee. So thank you.
And yeah, and so good memory, directors. We have been doing some sort of interim repairs, but this is the big one.
Great. Any other directors want to make any comments? If not, I will open it up to members of the public. Is there any member of the public who wishes to ask a question or make a comment on this item? Hearing none, is there a motion on the table?
Move staff recommendation.
I'll second. Go ahead, Director Sethi.
Go with Judy. She beat me to the.
Directors Weed,
Hi.
Gunther,
All right.
Wong,
Aye.
Sethi,
Aye.
and Akbari.
Aye. Thank you. Moving on to item 5.4, appointment to the boards of the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency, also known as BOSCA, and the Bay Area Regional Water System Financing Authority. And with that, I'll turn it over to the general manager.
Thank you, President Akbari. The Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency, known as BOSCA, was created in 2003 to represent the interests of the cities, water districts, and 2 private utilities that purchase water on a wholesale basis from the San Francisco Regional Water System and is governed by a 26-member board of directors. The Bay Area Regional Water System Financing Authority is a regional organization empowered to raise money if needed to help rebuild the San Francisco Bay Area Regional Water System. The enabling acts for BOSCA and the Financing Authority allow ACWD to reappoint a director for an unlimited number of terms or to appoint a new director at the end of each term to represent ACWD. John H. Weed is ACWD's current representative to the board of directors of BOSCA and to the RFA, with a term ending on June 30th of this year. ACWD must make an appointment for the next 4-year term before June 30th to be effective July 1st, 2021. Director Weed has expressed a willingness to serve for another term on both boards, but I've had a conversation with him and he's also open to having another ACWD board member serve in this role if interested. Director Weed feels, I think, pretty strongly that it should be a member of the ACWD board and not a member of staff that serves in this role. Board authorization of this item will help meet the district's strategic plan goal 2.2, protect existing imported water supplies. So the recommendation is by motion, take action to make an appointment to a 4-year term on the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency and the Bay Area Regional Water System Financing Authority boards through June 2025, and be happy to respond to any questions.
Great, thank you, Bob. Director Weed, would you like to make any comments?
Well, I am a charter member of this organization, one of 2 of the 26 positions. It's an interesting organization. Gives you a different view. It has evolved over that time in its own internal philosophy. I think they've made some unfortunate decisions, but they still exist and they provide, and they're a good user group. The irony is that the predecessor to this was a user group called BAWA. And the employees of BAWA were employees of the Alameda County Water District. And so we were probably the most organized organization of the group. And Art Jensen, who has been former head of the water enterprise for SFPC, was the general manager. In the early days, Jim Gunther was involved in the establishment of when we went through the legislature with BOSCA. There also is a parallel group on the technical side, which BOSCA participates in, more as an observer. So our technical people do have a chance. This is more for board policy. Since the majority of the membership is municipal governments with term limits, there are a number of people who have just show up and have no water background whatsoever. And the issues have changed. At one time, 2018 was supposed to be a real year because that's where the point that the guarantees for 184 MGD would expire. And 2018 has come and gone without a crisis. So they now need to find another reason to maintain their organization and their function. This board, our district and the board supported there not being a member of Los Vaqueros, but they're waffling on that. It's again a curious organization. Real organizations have debt, lawsuits, and water. They have found a way to get debt by taking on debt from SFPUC. Lawsuits by getting involved as standby or imper for amicus curiae briefs, et cetera, with using Hanson Bridget for their, and running up significant legal fees, but they have no real water. So we'll see where they evolve. They're running around looking at numerous operations. One was reverse flows through the city of Hayward municipal system, taking East Bay mud water and transferring it over to San Francisco. Fortunately, that nonsense died because they couldn't get insurance for that effort. And that was after they'd spent $250,000 along that plan. So I greatly enjoy it. I think it's wonderful, but it's one of those experiences for if there's another member that has a desire to get involved in this on their meetings, the third Thursday of every other month, and on the policy committee, generally midday on the second Wednesday. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Weed. Are there any directors who wish to make a comment or ask a question?
I'll go ahead and comment too. Yeah, the Director Weed's correct. I was there when this thing was formed, and it was, when we were doing it, I always thought about, what's going to happen. And he's correct in that I think a bureaucracy maybe has been formed. However, I think it was a necessary bureaucracy, certainly at the time, and they do serve a nice purpose of keeping San Francisco in check. But he's also quite correct in that the majority of the people on Bosca are not water people. They're primarily from the cities. If I'm not mistaken, you could certainly correct me, but they're the cities, and they do change. So I think it's important that we have somebody on that board. I do agree that it's best to be a director. I see that Director Weed's in attendance tonight, so I can't nominate him because he's not here. I'm happy that he's willing to do it again, and I would certainly nominate him to continue on it. It's tough. It's not easy being over there and dealing with them because they don't deal with water. And when they first started, it was fun to be on that startup, but I didn't have the time and still have difficulty with the time. But I remember one time talking with the mayor of Palo Alto and during the sessions, and we were starting it up, and I made a comment to her, our job is water. Your job is to worry about, you got to worry about what the trash is going to be picked up. And she said, yeah, they were having arguments over where you put an American flag on the lawn versus at the time fixing the San Francisco water supply. So I'm happy Director Weed would like to continue. I fully support him to go back on it.
Thank you.
I have a comment as well. I support Director Weed continuing service on behalf of our district. As the board knows, I regularly attend the Bosca board policy meetings every other month. Occasionally, I will go to a board meeting. I've been reluctant to actually go to the board meetings because they're in the evening over in San Mateo, and it's, pre-COVID-19, it was just really difficult to go back and forth in the evening with all the traffic and everything across the San Mateo Bridge or Dumbarton Bridge. So occasionally I have gone to a board meeting with Director Weed, but I prefer going to the board policy meetings because they're midday. I can get there accessibly, and oftentimes I'm working on the other side of the peninsula. So it's just a short hop to attend those meetings. But I will concur with Director Weed, and I'm actually concerned about this aspect of Bosca, that most of the members of the committee are council members or staff from cities that have no knowledge of water, zero. We're talking about the most important water supply here for the Bay Area, distributed wide. And I am constantly in shock at the lack of understanding of the real material issues that we're dealing with in the water industry. And I'm also concerned about the rotation of these council members. They come in and out off the board. There's no comprehensive understanding of the history of BOSCA, what's transpired over the term. It seems like at almost, every meeting, you're trying to re-educate people to come up to speed. And I wish it was the appointments to the board were more professionally designated for people that come from the public works units of their cities and other areas where they have some knowledge of what's going on. What I have observed, and I am critical of this, is that we have appointees to the BOSCA board that just want a feather in their cap as a council member that they serve on this board, but they do not in any way have any capability to actually serve and make a real contribution to the board. That's where I feel really disappointed. I think even if I disagree with Director Weed on certain issues, that he serves the citizens and residents of our agency extremely well. So I'm honored to have John continue his service, but I did want to make my comments clear.
Thank you, Director.
Thank you.
And I'll echo what's been said as well. I think Director Weed brings a uniquely critical eye that I think is very valuable. And so I'm very happy to support you in your reappointment, Director Weed.
Thank you.
And I just want to say thank you, Director Weed, for representing ACWD so well.
Okay, thank you.
So with that, is there a motion on the table?
I'll move that we renominate Director Weed for item 5.4, both boards, both groups.
I'll second that motion.
Directors Weed,
Aye.
Gunther,
All right.
Wong,
Aye.
Steffi,
Aye.
and Akbari.
Aye.
If I could make one editorial comment here.
Yes.
We now have Zoom meetings, so people can sit in and observe without having to make the travel. And I think that will stay in place even after COVID-19 goes away. And hopefully there's clarification in our board reimbursement policy that when attending one of the meetings that you were not otherwise compensated for, that would qualify for a board attendance.
Director Weed, BOSCA meetings are on the list of attendance, at meetings that are considered service at the
Okay, good.
the
I was
request.
not quite clear on that.
Yeah, so that if a board member wishes to attend a BOSCA meeting, then that meets it's pre-approved.
Okay, good. And also BOSCA had sponsored some tours and they were been hot and cold on this. At one time they were worried too many environmentalists were getting on board and suspended them. But tours of the San Francisco PUC facilities, both on the East Bay and the peninsula, as well as up to Hetch Hetchy. So hopefully that is included as well in the broad context of a BOSCA event.
That is correct. Tours, in my view, are also included because they are educational events and they are considered service rendered at the request of the board and do not require pre-approval.
Fantastic, thank you.
And I actually took one of those tours. Highly recommend it. The system is fascinating. It was a very in-depth tour, and it taught me the need for why we had to have POSCA versus where we were and why we needed to push San Francisco to do that project. Question for Pat Miyake. What happens if there's 3 of us on the attending the Zoom meeting? Is that an issue, or does?
The answer is no, because it's a public meeting by another agency. And so as long as you're participating as part of that meeting, you wouldn't be violating the Brown Act. You can't discuss among yourselves ACWD business, but you can all attend a BOSCA board meeting.
Okay, let's behave then. Okay.
Let me make one other quick observation. When BOSCA was formed in 2003, the cost of San Francisco water was $440 per acre foot, or $1 per unit. Today, it's 5 times that.
Great. Congratulations, Director Weed, on your reappointment. With that, we conclude the action calendar tonight, and we'll move on to item 6, reports. Looking at item 6.1, board committee reports. Are there any directors who wish to make a comment or ask a question on any committee reports?
No.
Great. Any members of the public who wish to make a comment or ask a question on item 6.1? Hearing none, we'll move on to item 6.2, operational reports. Are there any directors who wish to make a comment or ask a question on any operational report?
I have one.
Go ahead, Rick. Good. Well, I was going to comment on the water harness report, as thank the staff for continuing to keep their eyes on those of us up in Union City.
So I was also going to comment on the same hardness report. I had a discussion with Ms. Heides yesterday about the hardness and how uniform it was from North Union City all the way to South Fremont, which is kind of rare. And so I would like to offer staff an opportunity here to help elucidate for the board and the public why we have this anomaly going on right now. Because the South Fremont water was fairly soft for quite a long time, consistent with Newark, but now from north to south, we've got this uniform hardness around the 140, 150 level.
Yeah, thank you, Director Sethi. Since our hardness is sort of a component of our water supply as well as our operation, I think I will first allow Ms. Heides, our Water Resources Manager, to comment, and then Mr. Ahrens, our Operations and Maintenance Manager, if he has any additional thoughts.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Shaver. So it was an interesting alignment of events, it looks like, with the hardness graph. If you look at the top left, there's a water quality hardness number for treatment plant number 2 that's around, a little bit below 150. I don't have it pulled up here on my screen here, but it just happens to be that at this time of year, that water coming from the Delta has a little bit more mineral content in it than it would normally at this time of year, given the dry conditions. So it happens to be similar to our blended hardness. And so you see the water treatment plant number 2 water heading south with that hardness, quite similar to what is being produced toward the north with the same hardness range. So partially due to the dry year, and I'm sure also partially due to the way the system is operating, which I will turn it over to Mr. Ahrens to share any other details on that, because it's really a function of both things.
Yes, thank you, Mrs. Heides. I think you covered it well. TP2 gets us water from the Delta, and right now probably limited inflows in the Delta and just poor water quality. It's gotten a little harder. In addition to that, sorry about that. In addition, some changes I'll point out is also for the blending facility. Last month, San Francisco was on local supply. So we're receiving water from their Sonol treatment plant from San Antonio Reservoir. So that had a little bit higher hardness as well. So that actually raised hardness a little bit in the northern Union City area. So good observations. So both TP2 and the blender were up a little bit last month. But you will be happy to know next month, or when you look at next month's report for March, you'll notice a dramatic change in that as well. So I will leave that cliffhanger for the next month's discussion, and we can talk about what happens at the next meeting.
I will be watching.
And you mean I don't get to ask the directors to cheat and look at the March committee meeting minutes? Because we just had that presentation last week.
Yes, that would give them a sneak peek. But those minutes won't be until next month's agenda, so I'm holding quiet.
Well, it's good that we're keeping the directors in suspense, but if there are any questions, we'd be happy to respond.
The water's great. I mean, where we were in the past, I think a lot of people have forgotten. A lot of hard work by a lot of people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I will say this, I'm not complaining about the hardness of the water right now. When it was very low, more consistent with the desal water in Newark, I have to admit it was very hard to take a shower because I was spending a lot more water just to get the soap off and everything. And it doesn't help to have a little bit harder water, when you're bathing and everything like that. Water still tastes great. I have no complaints.
Good. Glad to hear.
Are there any members of the public who wish to make a comment or ask a question on item 6.2?
And I will just note for the record, Director Clark Rediker, who was a chemist with an undergraduate and master's degree from Stanford, constantly used to talk about the hardness of the water. And if it was too soft, he would complain because he said, I can't take a proper shower. I'm spending and wasting too much water to take a shower. So get the water harder. Just a little history. And he was a great director, by the way, for 30 years or so. Jim, you got a few years to catch up, and so does Director Weed.
I don't know. I think Clark was just a wonderful guy, just incredible.
I see that we have a member of the public with their hand raised, Mr. Ken N.
Yes, I just wanted to congratulate the board or just mention that I am glad to see that the district is paying close attention to the hardness of the water that's being supplied to the customers of the district. I do agree that if it's too soft or perhaps inconsistent, one has to be adjust the way they use surfactants because of the behavior of the surfactants between very soft and hard water. But in general, soft water is desirable because it also lengthens the service life of plumbing and equipment like water heaters. So I do again congratulate the district on their attention to the hardness of the water being served to its customers. Thanks.
Thank you for your comment. Are there any other members of the public who wish to make a comment?
I think we need a definition of surfactants for the understanding of the public. I'm one of the public too.
Soap.
All right. Hearing no more comments, we will move on to item 6.3, staff presentations, and we'll move to item 6.3.1, Niles Cone Groundwater Conditions and Survey Report Review. And with that, I will turn it over to our general manager.
Thank you, President Akbari. This particular presentation is one of my personal favorites. The board receives a presentation from Mr. Hollowell each year. And I will turn this over to our Water Resources Manager, Laura Heides, who will kick this off for us.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver. And I'm going to apologize in advance. My Zoom's acting a little crazy. So if you lose me, I'll log back in on another device. But hopefully you can make it through this. The Replenishment Assessment Act of Alameda County Water District requires the board to order an engineering survey and report on groundwater conditions, which was ordered by the board on November 12th, 2020, and is the first step in the process to establish a replenishment assessment for the next fiscal year. Recommendations in the survey report on groundwater conditions are based on projected activities needed to sustain the groundwater basin in fiscal year 2021-22, with consideration of groundwater levels and quality documented in the 2020 Groundwater Monitoring Report. Tonight, Mike Hallowell, Groundwater Resources Engineer, is presenting information on the Niles Cone Groundwater Conditions and Survey Report to assist the board in its review of the two reports received by the board on February 11th, 2021. Eileen Chen, Groundwater Resources Scientist and author of the Groundwater Monitoring Report, is also here tonight. This is my 30th year authoring the survey report and Eileen's 17th year authoring the Groundwater Monitoring Report. And I want to just congratulate and thank them both for their dedication to these important efforts. I'd also like to acknowledge Ms. Michelle Myers in the audience, our Groundwater Resources Manager, who's here to support this item tonight as well. And before we begin, I'd also like to note that tonight's presentation happens to coincide quite appropriately with National Groundwater Awareness Week, which is March 7th through 13th this year, which is an annual observance established to highlight the responsible development, management, and use of groundwater, and to encourage yearly water well testing and well maintenance. And now I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Hallowell to make his presentation.
Well, good evening, members of the board, executive staff, and members of the public. Next slide, please, Gina. With Eileen Chen and Michelle Myers here to help answer questions after the slides, we aim to nicely summarize for you the latest determined groundwater basin conditions and explain the rationale behind two recommendations for next fiscal year. First, the amount of supplemental water for groundwater recharge, and secondly, the rate of replenishment assessment. Our material is based on the recently completed Groundwater Monitoring Report and Survey Report. ACWD's groundwater resources technicians collected all the data in the field for the monitoring report, and the survey report was prepared with extensive coordination with the Water Resources Planning Division and the Finance Department. Next slide, please. We hope you find tonight's presentation helpful, given the imminence of the public hearing on replenishment assessment, which is scheduled next board meeting, April 13. After the hearing, the last order of business for the board for the year on replenishment assessment will be the resolutions. They will contain the board's findings, including what the replenishment assessment rate will be effective July 1. And they are also calendared for April 13th in order to preserve the earliest opportunity for the board to get to them. However, should the board determine that it needs more time to consider public comment, the Replenishment Assessment Act would allow the board to extend the hearing with additional work sessions, but the hearing, which must start on April 13th, would need to be completed on or before May 4th, and the resolutions adopted on or before May 11th. Next slide, please. Now on to groundwater basin conditions. The northwest trending Hayward Fault acts as a barrier to lateral groundwater flow, subdividing our basin into two management areas known as the above Hayward Fault on the east side and the below Hayward Fault on the west side. And our familiar cutaway view, next slide, please. The Hayward Fault is depicted by the red vertical dotted line. To the far right is the above Hayward Fault aquifer. On the opposite side of the line, the below Hayward Fault management area consists of a stack of 4 regional aquifers. By order of depth, they are the Newark, Seneval, Fremont, and Deep aquifers. The Seneval and Fremont are often referred to as a combined unit, the Seneval-Fremont aquifer. To the upper left, San Francisco Bay appears as a dark green puddle. And indeed, it is shallow compared to the thickness of the alluvium beneath the bay all the way down to bedrock, but it is a significant feature for the basin. understood to be in direct hydraulic contact with the underlying Newark aquifer and therefore the source of saltwater intrusion. From the early 1900s into the 1960s, saltwater from the bay entered the basin and migrated inland via the Newark aquifer, eventually reaching the Hayward Fault. Once inland, brackish water made its way downward through abandoned wells and through natural weaknesses in the aquitards, impacting the Central Fremont and deep aquifers. Next slide, please. Saltwater intrusion occurred because groundwater levels in the Newark aquifer were depressed below sea level due to heavy pumping beyond the recharge capacity of the basin during that era. Next slide. The early 1960s were a turning point, though, as ACWD started to gain critical legal and institutional means to respond to the problem and put the basin on a path of long-term sustainability and improvement. We've got the Replenishment Assessment Act, converted quarries to recharge ponds, put in inflatable dams and diversion structures, and entered into imported water contracts. Critical policies and programs were put in place, wells were metered, and the replenishment assessment was instituted as a funding mechanism to help pay for activities and facilities that supply and maintain the groundwater basin. Next slide. Consequently, groundwater levels began to rebound after 1962 and are now maintained about as high as they can be. Gradual reversal of saltwater intrusion has been ongoing since 1972, when levels in the Newark aquifer crossed back above sea level. Next slide. The status of progress in mitigating legacy saltwater intrusion is updated by semi-annual sampling of our network of monitoring wells and then expressing the results, next slide, through maps and charts. These are the latest chloride concentration contours for the Newark aquifer. The crosshatch pattern depicts the area restored since 1962 to the drinking water standard. Next slide. Trending chloride concentrations in individual wells over multiple years provides a way to cut through year-to-year noise in the data and verify water quality is going in the right direction. Here, we have a Newark aquifer well with a 10-year trend line slope of 4.5% per year decrease, which is we found to be typical of other Newark aquifer wells along this contour. Next slide. Now we come to the Central Fremont aquifer. Here are the chloride contours in the fall of 2020. Next slide. And here are the areas of contraction and expansion of brackish water since 1962. But even in the area of expansion, we see decreasing trends ranging from less than 1% per year. So next slide, please. Ranging from less than 1% per year to, next slide, to more dramatic decreases, such as 7% at this location. Next slide. And about 5% here in the southwest extreme of the brackish water zone. Next slide. Now we come to the deep aquifer with current chloride contours and areas are changed since 1962. The band of brackish water extending northwesterly into Hayward was revealed with installation of new monitoring wells in 2005. Accordingly, brackish water could have been there a long time, possibly prior to 1962. Right? Next slide. But over the last 10 years, we're seeing decreases in chloride from a fraction of a percent per year in the far northwest. Next slide. To about 1% per year as we move to the center of the basin. Next slide. Over the entire network of wells that we have in the Newark, Central Fremont, and deep aquifers, decreasing chloride trends were not observed in all wells, but were in most, suggesting that legacy saltwater intrusion is diminishing in the basin overall. Rising sea levels will present future challenges, but we credit success to date with the sustainability measures, including, next slide, pumping ARP wells, which supply the desalination facility and export a lot of salt in the process. Next slide. Getting abandoned wells sealed through our well ordinance program, including some that had tapped the deep aquifer in the northwest. Next slide. And keeping groundwater, the groundwater basin pressurized. This shows groundwater levels in the AHF and Newark aquifers in the fall of 2020. Now, maps of levels over the whole basin, like this one, are made possible through visits to a large number of wells on a semi-annual basis. But measurements at a smaller select set of indicator wells are measured weekly for quick updates of the status of our supply. Here we show two of them, one for the above Hayward Fault and the other for the below Hayward Fault management area. Next slide, please. In charting the water level history over these wells over time, the blue dots are actual measurements and the red line is the model simulation. This is the AHF well, and next slide. Here is our BHF indicator well. The model was run to the end of 2022 to confirm that the recommended amount of supplemental water for groundwater recharge would maintain acceptable groundwater levels under the assumption of continued dry conditions through 2021, followed by resumption of normal rainfall in 2022. Next slide. And that's how we landed on the recommended 3,200 acre feet of supplemental water for groundwater recharge in FY 21-22, as shown to the left in the forecast water balance. Next slide. The groundwater basin share of fixed and variable costs for supplemental water is represented by the teal colored slice on the lower right side of the pie chart. Going clockwise to the purple sliver at the bottom, we've allocated a fraction of next year's cost of Los Vaqueros Reservoir expansion and delta conveyance to the groundwater basin, as these projects are expected to help ensure the reliability of imported water supplies for the basin. The large pink slice to the left is groundwater CIP projects, which include Shin Pond Fish Screens and Rubber Dam 1 fish ladder, and then adding in recurring costs of basin operations and programs represented by the remaining pie slices. We anticipate a total of $36 million for next fiscal year. Only the items or fractions of those items that benefit the groundwater basin have been considered here, and we appreciate the input of staff in all four departments who help us ensure an accurate discernment. Next slide, please. And we look at revenue the same way. If we were a groundwater replenishment only district, this is the revenue stream we would have: replenishment assessment fees, property taxes, and grants. In this narrative, ACWD's distribution system is treated the same as a private pumper paying replenishment assessment fees. So to answer an astute question that was raised last board meeting, our distribution system is the largest user of groundwater in the basin, so is projected to cover 94% of the replenishment assessment next fiscal year. As such, it is true that the proposed increased rate for purposes other than agricultural and municipal recreation would bring in only a small amount of additional external revenue, but it would ensure that private pumpers continue to pay their fair share and that the district would not be in reaction mode with the rates if a big pumper were to come in. Going down the list, we have tax revenue and expect 10.6 million in grants, but we still get a shortfall here at the bottom. The reason why we're not proposing to close the gap with an increase higher than 3% is given by a multi-year cash flow. Next slide, please. The analysis shows that actual revenue for FY 19-20 has met costs nicely. Then going forward into the future with the proposed 3% increase next year in conjunction with the grants, revenue gets us over the hump of remaining fish passage and fish screen projects. And then after the grants, revenue falls off, but we're still on the cost line, not way below and then having to face catching up to it. Then for the longer term future, revenue should be in good position to meet the trending costs, whatever that becomes. Now, next year's survey report will have the benefit of knowledge of the outcome of the budget process, which is now underway. We'll have a new CIP and a new 2-year budget. What you see here is based on the current CIP and a projection off the FY 2021 expense budget. The hump around 2030 is Vallecito's channel betterments. The proposed replenishment assessment for next fiscal year is well supported by the outlook we have today, and we expect that it would hold up under the upcoming budget. Next slide, please. A 3% adjustment, if approved by the board, would fall below the long-term 3.5% per year rate of increase in RA rates since 1997, as we've shown here in green. Next slide. And here is an update on replenishment assessment rates at the Orange County Water District and Valley Water. These two agencies, like ACWD, have replenishment acts, manage intensively use groundwater basins in urban settings, and perform artificial recharge. But groundwater basins are unique, have their own set of issues, so we acknowledge the limitation of the comparison. Orange County's proposed rate for next year was not available. Next slide. So that concludes my presentation. Thank you so much. We're ready for your questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hollowell. I will open it up to the board. Are there any directors who wish to ask a question or make a comment? Director Sethi.
Yes, Mr. Hallowell, thank you so much for once again giving an excellent presentation. I do have one question. So you are showing every year the improvement in our groundwater system in terms of salinity. But one thing I'm not clear on is what is the goal statistically? You're showing numbers on parts per million or parts per liter and everything like that. But what is the measure of success here that says, hey, we're getting close to where we want to be? Is that a fair
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, it's really kind of, we're in sort of this operating situation right now where we've made the best of the situation that we have, where we've got a desal facility, so we're actually able to use water that exceeds the drinking water standard there. And I would say that the one thing that to keep in mind too is that as we continue to export salt out of the basin, and get back to kind of or shall we say, make more improvements toward the way things were before we had saltwater intrusion, there is flexibility, that we'll still have a lot of our reservoir. If we had years where we had, say, saltwater, we had to get lower, because of less water coming in, or sea level rise, for example, we would have more flexibility to allow chloride to come in, and then recover from that. So if for example, if we had just a small little area carved out, we'd have nothing. You'd have to do desalination everywhere. So in some ways we're operating the basin sustainably, and we're making the best of it right now. So there's really, we're able to use the groundwater basin because of desal. And in so doing, we also are to some degree reducing the operating cost of the the desal facility itself as well, because of every time you bring down chlorides, you get a little bit of benefit on power. So, and it is helping for private wells as well to kind of continue to bring the salt down like that. With a coastal system like this, you really have to kind of keep operating above sea level, or you can't really drop and say, okay, that's it. We don't have to have recharge ponds anymore. We can let it go. So we've kind of done this thing where we're improving, but instead of waiting for some great improvement, we actually have got to the point we can use the groundwater basin quite extensively because of desal. So not sure if that 100% answers your question, but we can always come back with some more thoughts later if you felt you needed that.
Paul, do you have another question? I have a follow on your question.
No, go ahead.
At one point I was in search of a simple metric to try and monitor the success of the recovery program. And we had discussed the number of thousands of metric tons of salt that had been removed, and that which we needed to remove in order to achieve a level of success before we got to a level of substance or maintenance. Have we given any more thought to that?
Yeah, we thought we would try to introduce some, we had a metric before where we used our groundwater model, and we did try to estimate a tonnage and so forth. And there's a lot of uncertainty with that because you're using model parameters and model thicknesses and model, storage coefficients and so forth. And we were getting these numbers, and we were doing it every year, and it was kind of nice. And we thought we'd mix it up and do some real data and come out with some real trends to see if we really were, knocking things down, particularly out at the where the 250 ppm line is, and really moving the Newark back and all that. That kind of metric could still be kind of brought back in if we wanted to. We could do that and try to go back on that thing. But it does have a lot of limitations because of the assumptions of because a lot of it is model. I mean, they're real chlorides, but it's model volumes of water. But if we do it every year and we're consistent, we can still see the year-over-year change, which still has some particular benefit. But so that type of metric can still be brought back in and looked at. What we did continue doing is the amount of tonnage that we're removing out of the desal facility there. So perhaps that's what we did. That's how we put in these trend lines this year, and as we did last year as well. But that other way of doing it is still possible to keep doing.
Okay. Hoping to see some light at the end of it, some objective, than just maintaining it decade after decade. And then we can reach a level of static. The next question, if it's appropriate, we show 94% and 6%, but that appears to not include ag and municipal recreation. Is that correct?
94% would be the entirety of the district's replenishment assessment, if I did my calculation correctly. I did take that into account, I believe.
So in the remainder, we have, what strikes me is that $500 per acre foot is less than a quarter of what we're charging people for water coming out of our pipes, which is fully treated. And we're using that fully treated water for irrigation. Where now that we've recovered much of the groundwater basin, the well water could be directly used for a quarter of the cost for some of the same purposes. And in a contingency environment, maybe that's the way to approach this, to have water supply throughout the district, which meets fire flow and sanitary flow criteria, as well as irrigation, maybe should an objective that we should consider. With 2,500 GPM pumps, we can fill a fire truck and have it available if we lose our hydrant system. So I may encourage us to look in terms of, and we have a pilot project in our CIP, which I don't believe was ever developed, where we would use well water directly for irrigation down in the Automall area. So to the extent that we can keep that in mind in order to keep costs in line. The next is, can we look at well water to support sanitary flows? With conservation, our water flows are dropping in a number of our collection systems. The sanitary district is saying that they're concerned that they're not getting as much flow into their plants and that they're much heavier concentrations of suspended solids. And that maybe one way to supplement that is to put well water into the sanitary system to allow it to get better effectiveness. It's been noted that the combined storm drains and sewers have engineering benefits in parts of the country because when the rains come through, they help flush out the sanitary lines and they make them far more effective. The next thought is that in addition to chlorides, might we be looking at manganese, dissolved oxygen, and even PFAS in the groundwater basin to see if we're helping to clean up those issues on it. I was amazed to learn that recently, only recently, that one of the problems we have at the desal plant is that some of our well fields have zero or non-detect dissolved oxygen. That's an anaerobic condition. And that we have other wells with high manganese that we'd like to dilute. So I've thrown a bunch of stuff at you and see what we can. Any response?
If I can, I can respond to the last one to some degree, the manganese dissolved oxygen nitrate. We do have used the monitoring network. We do use the monitoring well network to sample for other things than salt. We have some special studies where a number of constituents were collected, and we do have some data, and there are some things that could be talked about there. And I don't know if Michelle or Eileen, you want to add to that.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Hallowell. I can add to that. So as Mike mentioned, we have some of that data from the special studies as well as our own production wells. And we can maybe we're looking at all of it in the collective as part of our Sigma alternative update. And so I think it would probably be appropriate to bring that information to committee, at least for a start. And then we have a workshop in July where we can present everything that we've collected to date. And then as far as the investigation regarding PFAS, we are actually taking that on as we speak. And we just sampled some wells, monitoring wells, as well as surface water samples this week. So look forward to presenting that information also at committee once we get the results back.
Has there been any consideration to making that an addendum to this annual report on an annual basis?
It probably will be, yes, for PFAS.
Well, I'm also thinking of dissolved oxygen, manganese, and other factors that are appearing now in our groundwater review. The emerging items of interest.
Thank you for those thoughts, Director Weed. Once again, you operate in the future, and always appreciate receiving your feedback. These are definitely some things that we can consider, including what information we put in our annual report. As Ms. Myers indicated, we're at the very beginning of our PFAS journey, I know, and we're also evaluating manganese and dissolved oxygen. We're at the beginning of that journey as well. So thank you. Regarding well water and the utilization of it for the district, I would suggest that that's something that we could work with the board on as we update our integrated resources plan.
Okay.
And then
there have been suggestions that the school districts could reduce water costs by working with municipal recreation to irrigate many of their grounds.
And we have had conversations with the cities and the school districts regarding the use of well water and others in the past when it meets their needs. But that's definitely something that we can talk about as part of our overall water supply portfolio when we update our IRP. And then the idea of utilizing well water to supplement sanitary flows rather is a new one for me. I haven't heard that one before. Obviously, if the issue is during dry years, that won't help our groundwater basin, right? But it could save Union Sanitary District potentially some operating and maintenance cost related issues. So that's something that we'll think about a little bit, but I have to confess that again, you're out there in front of at least me with some of these ideas, and we can think about that as staff. So thank you.
Thank you.
If I can just build on Director Weed's comments. In the past, periodically, we had a joint board meeting between Union Sanitary District and ACWD. I would just throw it out there. It might be timely to have another one in the upcoming year. I don't know the merits of the idea that Director Weed's talking about, but it's certainly worth exploring. And I would just note that we do meet with the union sanitary directors periodically. I was with two of them yesterday in the special districts meeting, and Tom Handley and I both serve at the Chamber of Commerce on the Government Affairs Committee. So we hear these stories about the troubles that they're going through with the decline in flows through the sanitary system. So it might be worthwhile, just even if it's just for being good neighbors with USD, to have a joint meeting again.
I would suggest let staff explore this at staff level. The reason I say that is coming from someone who used to write wastewater treatment plant discharge permits a long, long time ago. Groundwater is not pristine. It actually potentially have metals and other constituents that's regulated by the discharge permit. I am pretty sure Union San does not want to introduce things that they have to spend extra money to treat or potentially not be able to treat. So I would suggest have staff talk to each other to see if this actually is a viable option before the boards get involved.
Okay, I would note that our groundwater basin is relatively sound. It's consumed drinkable, and that Union Sand may well be another customer for us at $500 an acre foot.
I am not saying no. I'm just saying there are things like metals that has much higher level, allowable level in drinking water than the discharge permit. So just explore to see is it even the potential, because we don't want to end up creating more problems for them.
There lies the problem with the regulations that look for drinking water rather than safe water.
No, I'm just going to say, for example, for copper, fish, and it's actually is a lot less tolerant of copper, for example, and human actually needs it. If you look at your daily multivite, it's actually one of the items that's in your daily multivite. We're all different. So there's a reason for regulation, and I'm going to stop right there.
So I routinely meet with Mr. Eldridge at Union Sanitary District, and we never have a shortage of issues to discuss and to coordinate on. So I have now another issue to talk to him about, and we'll see where we go with that. So thank you.
I'd just like to point out, this is a great report. I just look forward to this every year. The numbers, the graphs, it's absolutely fascinating. And I remember when Sigma was being talked about, and I was like, doesn't everybody do this already? And it was kind of, not word shocking, but it was an education that no, everybody doesn't do this. And I think the district should be commended for what they've done to develop this knowledge of their groundwater basin and what we've got. And I think sometimes we don't even know the value of what we have compared to what others, they don't have anything like this. And thank you, staff. This is great work. I love this report. I wish, this is the one I wish I was in the boardroom to hear. It's just not the same on Zoom. And thanks again. It's a great report. I do agree with Director Weed. It kind of be, we've been doing it for a while now. And it's nice that we're actually talking about, hey, what would be parity or an end. And it's great that we can actually even talk about that. So once again, great job, and just keep it up. It's great work. I think there should be college lessons at, for, I guess, geology or whatever. I'm not sure what subject, but certainly something would benefit from this.
So that's actually a very good point. I somehow got distracted. My apologies. I do agree with Director Weed. At some point, we do need to look at the objective of what we're trying to accomplish. right? The original aquifer reclamation program is to reduce the salinity so we have more groundwater storage capacity under our feet. Now that we have a desal, the way we use our groundwater basin is slightly different. So perhaps it's about time we take another look and see, do we still need to call this an aquifer reclamation program? I understand staff needs these data to continue to manage our groundwater basin. But perhaps at some point we do need to change the objective.
You know, I'm just thinking off the top of my head here about Director Gunther's comments. If I would just throw out the idea that the Groundwater Association, which is a more technical society of people meeting, they might really be interested in this historical presentation, an overview of how ACWD has managed its underground water system and tried to reverse the salinity in the underground system. Could make for a really nice presentation to the Groundwater Association.
I am going to guess staff has made multiple presentations. ACWD actually has one of the most highly respected groundwater program and staff in the industry in the Bay Area.
Yes, we have made numerous presentations to various organizations. We also have one of the most highly studied groundwater basins out there. So when we feel that we have information that our industry and interested people benefit from, we do make presentations from time to time. So great comments, all great input, and thank you. And I thank staff for an excellent presentation. And we do have a little business left, do we not, staff? Or is this it?
Well, tonight is just an informational presentation. Ms. Myers, would you like to cover next steps or anything else?
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Titus. So, so we're going to be presenting a lot of information over the next several months in regards to SGMA, and we have the public hearing next month regarding the replenishment assessment rate. And with the ultimate goal when it comes to saltwater intrusion, one of the sustainability indicators as part of the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act is negative impacts due to saltwater intrusion. And so we'll definitely talk about that and where the needle is now and the future goals and where we want to be as part of that process. So, yeah, so we'll see you next month at the public hearing.
Wonderful. I just want to express my appreciation for Mr. Hallowell, Ms. Myers, Ms. Chen, Ms. Heides, and everyone who put so much work into this report. It was an excellent presentation. I want to also open it up to members of the public and give them an opportunity to ask any questions or make any comments on this item. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak? Hearing none, I believe we can conclude this item.
That's correct.
Wonderful. And just finding my place on the schedule. Moving on to item 6.3.2, Water Efficiency Master Plan, Draft Report Overview.
Thank you, President Akbari. Before I throw this item over to Ms. Heides, we did try something different for the board report, for the agenda. We included a link. The Water Efficiency Master Plan report is a fairly lengthy report. So if you have any strong feelings about staff doing it this way, as opposed to adding the actual report to the board packet, I think that would be good for us to know. So you could think about that. And in the meantime, I will ask Ms. Heides to introduce this item for you.
Great, thank you, Mr. Shaver. This is another informational item tonight. As the board is aware, the district has been working toward developing a comprehensive water efficiency master plan over the last 2 years to guide the district's water conservation program moving forward. Ms. Stephanie Nevins, the district's water conservation supervisor, is here tonight to share the results of this work with the board and provide an overview of the draft plan. Sharing the draft plan with the board and the public represents a significant milestone in the project, and we look forward to receiving the board's feedback tonight. I'd also like to acknowledge the additional team members, some of whom are here tonight, who have contributed significantly to this effort, including water conservation specialists Megan Moreno and Giselle Delgadillo, as well as Thomas Nizer, water supply and planning manager. And now I'd like to turn it over to Ms. Nevins to begin the presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Heides. Good evening, members of the board, ACWD staff, and interested members of the public. I'll be presenting a brief summary of the draft water efficiency master plan. And as Bob mentioned, there's a link to the entire draft with the agenda. Some of what I'm going to go through in this presentation is review. You've seen it before. We had some of this information in April at the workshop. We've just finalized all the analysis and pulled it all together and then put it into a 140-page report. So I will go through some of these slides very quickly if they're review, and then focus on the ones that are new, the information. So I'm very excited to be here tonight to present this. It's been almost 2 years, and it feels really good to be at this point in the process. Let's see, I'm gonna go to my next slide here. This is again review. There's some terminology I just wanted to go over. We're using water use efficiency versus conservation. A measure is an action that delivers water use efficiency versus a program, which is a group of measures run together. A strategy is an approach for the water use efficiency program. So the presentation will
quickly make a comment on this.
Yeah.
I would suggest that there is a significant and basic difference in the approach between efficiency and conservation. And I'll go into that later. And how it came up in statewide water policy. They're different philosophical approaches to the issue. Many with overlap and same effect, but a different philosophy.
Okay, great. Yeah, we'll discuss that. We can talk about that more at the end of the presentation. Thank you. So this is the presentation purpose. We're going to talk about why we did this and what it's comprised of, our approach for the analysis, the guidance, and how we develop the strategies, what measures are in the strategies, what's the cost and savings, and then the recommended strategy benefits, and our implementation schedule, and how we will approach new measures that are brought to us. As you know, technology is always, there's always new technologies that can provide more water use efficiency benefits, and so we wanted to be able to bring those in a organized way. So, and then I'll talk about the schedule, the outreach, and next steps, and then I'll take your comments and questions. The purpose was the water efficiency master plan was brought up as a part of the 2018 5-year strategic plan. It ties in with promoting water conservation as a California way of life, and then can leverage advanced metering infrastructure. And it is the initial study, the base for the demand forecast for the urban water management plan, and then will play a significant role in the update of the 30-year integrated resources plan. And these were the points in the last couple of years where we either asked the board to provide input, or we reviewed various analysis strategies with the board. So in April was where we brought back what we had learned so far, and we had a recommendation of strategy B. And then we also brought the urban water management plan assumptions with water efficiency master plan strategy B to the board for that urban water management plan process. The report elements, these are the high level elements of the plan. We did surveys, we looked at what we've done in the past. We created through the demand forecasting, there's a baseline demand. I'll go into that a little bit more because the DSS model that our consultant had was what was used for that. Determining water use efficiency potential, survey played a lot into that. And then we developed the strategies, and now we're moving into the implementation phase where we will be tracking and then reviewing on an annual basis how we're doing. I'm not going to read through this whole slide. This was the approach that our consultant went through. We asked them to do these things. And it's kind of what I've already mentioned with the elements, but these are the more details on that. Medal's Water Management has 25 years of experience, and they were actually, the group Medal's Water Management was the consultant on the district's original IRP study, although it's a different group. They were mentored by the original Medal's Water Management principal. So just a little historical fact there. And as you may
Stephanie,
yeah.
Ms. Nevins, I
Yes.
have a question, or for anybody here. Do we know how much we spent on the consulting firm?
Yes. Well, we haven't finished the contract yet, but once we're done, it will be, I believe, just over $170,000.
All right, thank you. That sounds quite reasonable. Thank you.
You're welcome. So back in July of 2019, we asked the board for some guidance and some priorities for the water use efficiency program and our strategies that were going to come out of this process. And this is the list of ranked priorities: cost effectiveness and cost based, which is essentially looking at how much conservation can be achieved for the cost of an alternative supply. Low income and affordability was important. And then the fourth, and there were four priorities that were all in the number 4 category. So meeting state legislation, local control, customer interest, and regional consistency. And this was really helpful through the process. It really was great to have this as we were going through all of the work. This is the Medal's Water Management DSS model, which it's called a decision support system. And we bring in all of the key customer categories and their consumption as the baseline water use. We use population and employment to grow the demand. We also put in a short-term drought recovery, which was informed by our survey. That created the demand forecast. Then we put in plumbing code, which was based on all the new legislation that came in during the drought and after the drought, and for improved flow rates for fixtures and toilets. And then we put the conservation strategies on top of that to get what the demand would look like, and then we could forecast what uses by customer category, and we could also break it out by indoor and outdoor. It's a very robust model that we have and we can use in the future and every year to compare how successful we are with the process, with the strategy. So this same slide was brought to the April workshop, and we just gave this information to the consultant to help them figure out which measures would go into which category. So there was a cost, like everything below a certain cost would fit in this, in strategy A and strategy B. And then the idea was that there was one strategy that was a pretty light strategy. The next one was something that we were already doing, but a little bit more to meet new state legislation. And then there was the third category, which is kind of like the whole thing, just go for it. But it was also going to require some establishment of codes and regulations and rate changes. And this is how that all played out. So strategy A, these are the measures. So we started with over 100 measures that we reviewed with the consultant, and we went through a process of elimination, and we ended up with 26 measures. And they're all here on this chart. And then they were grouped according to the previous slide based on the criteria. And this is where it all landed. So the yellow highlighted area are the strategy B measures. There's strategy A and B combined. There are some measures that we evaluated that were not included in any strategy, and so I'll go into that. These 4 measures were not included in any of the strategies. There are 2 that are really, because of our advanced metering infrastructure project, didn't really make sense for us to pursue. That's the first 2 here, flow meter rebate and billing report education tool, non-AMI. The hot water on demand incentive, we reviewed what was in the model and we confirmed the consultant's analysis. So we left that out. Then there's the multifamily submetering for existing accounts. And the reason we left this out is it has a high customer costs and some implementation challenges. However, we do think that this should be looked at more closely. So we're not dismissing it altogether. We will look at it. We feel like the study that the information that was in the model was dated, and we want to look more closely at this one. So this is the 31-year life cycle cost. It starts in 2020 and goes to 2050. Water savings and benefit cost ratios. This is from the consultant's model. And the input is, we give them an avoided cost of water. We used ACWD's blended water, which is groundwater in San Francisco, which is really the true marginal cost of water. And that's $1,742 per acre foot. So this was escalated in the DSS model at a rate of inflation, but the DSS model actually, we found has some higher, it's more conservative. Some of the rates in there are higher than what we would use for our own analysis. So we did an offline outside of the DSS model analysis where we actually used San Francisco, the blended cost with San Francisco as true, what we're expecting for escalated costs for San Francisco in that analysis. And that is on the next slide here. So this is what we found from our offline outside of the model, the consultant's model. And it's actually, as you can see in the previous slide, all of the strategies are cost effective. And then our analysis shows that it was even more cost effective than what the consultant's model demonstrated. Strategy B has several benefits, and that it's cost effective for the short term for 5 years. It's a foundation for continuing the water use efficiency program and goals out to 2050. It does expand what we're already doing to meet new state mandated targets. It includes water use efficiency for income qualified customers. There's an integration with ACW's advanced metering infrastructure project, and it supports customer interests and takes advantage of regional partnerships like BOSCA, or the Bay Area Water Supply and Conservation Agency. Here's the implementation schedule for Strategy B. The green measures are new, and as you can see, only one of them kicks in right now. then others come online in 2023, which is really gearing us up for those new state mandates. There are some measures that are existing and there's really no change to them at this point. There are some that are existing, but we are going to modify them. We've already done some modifications. We have some updates to the rates and fee schedule that went in recently to account for this. So the other thing to note here is that not everything is running at the same time. So 16 measures is a lot of measures, but they don't all come online at the same time, and some of them end. The toilet measures, really, the reason that those are the ones that are ending before 2030 is because we anticipate that we will reach saturation and that those will no longer need to be run at that point. We also have a framework for evaluating new measures that are presented to us, new technology, new ways of doing things. And we would run through this process with every single one of those measures just to make sure that it fits within within our strategy that we've developed through the Water Efficiency Master Planning process. Just a reminder, this is a demand forecast. We brought this to the board in October for the Urban Water Management Plan assumptions. And so this project was part of that developing. It developed the demand forecast through the consultant's model. So our anticipated schedule, we're here tonight to get comments, and we are going to ask that everybody submit comments by March 17th. So you'll have time after tonight to deliver those comments to us. And then we will do a public information meeting. Right now we're looking at the 25th of March. That's a Thursday night. And we will start noticing that to the public right away. We have, and then we'll bring the final report to the board meeting on the 13th. And just a note, with the current draft, it's a pretty close to final draft, but there is going to be a kind of a final comb through by the consultant of grammar and links and headers and footnotes and references, just to make sure everything is totally lined up. I mentioned we're doing some outreach for the public information meeting. We'll send that out shortly. We're going to also post information on the website and social media. We have a stakeholders list that we're going to notify. We're going to meet with cities to talk about it. We've already talked to 2 cities to let them know that it's coming, but we're going to be reaching out to all of them very shortly to set something up so they can look through it and talk to us about it. And again, the public information meeting coming up. So upon approval of the final draft, we would start implementing strategy B for the next 5 years. It'll involve developing some work plans and budgets and outreach plans. And then we'll revisit this during the integrated resources plan process starting in 2023. And I also just wanted to note that this is not a program. That's why we're calling it the strategy a strategy, because it's really an approach and it's not prescriptive. And we want to be able to every year look back and say, what have we done? Have we been successful in achieving our targets in these measures? Do we need to change anything? And so we would just go back and maybe do something a little differently, maybe implement something differently. Maybe there's a new measure that is better than one of the ones that we have in the program that we would replace. So it just, the strategy that's governing the water use efficiency program can change and adapt as needed. So thank you. and I'm ready for all your questions and comments.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Nevins. I will open it up to the board. Are there any directors who wish to ask a question or make a comment?
None from me, but what a great presentation, Ms. Nevins. Thank you so much. And I just want to compliment everybody on all the hard work over the last couple of years.
Thank you.
I was the no vote when this came up for review for Plan B last time, and the basis are repeated here. The cost benefit analysis, I believe, is invalid. It fails to note that we have a 350% markup on our commodities. Last year, we spent $21.5 million was our cost for water supply, water, power, and chemicals, our variable cost. And we sold that for $79 million. The loss in revenue wipes out any cost benefit that we see in this program. Next, what is the need? There's a difference between water efficiency and water conservation. I'll go into that in a moment. Our water consumption is well below the regulatory requirements and will be throughout into the future. So there's no regulatory drive. We have a capacity of anywhere from 200% to 400% of our demand. Again, we don't have a capacity issue. And at the moment, we have water supply. But we have had issues of water. It's been temporal, not built in. But the fundamental difference in water conservation versus water efficiency, which is, I think, unfortunately reflected and not understood, I believe, in the initial comment that they're essentially the same, came out in the water policy developments of SB 7X, where the agricultural community did not want to touch the word conservation. That is not using water for the sake of not using water. Water efficiency is taking the water you have and using it as most effectively as you can to have a same economic result or a similar economic result. Those are totally different approaches. We have no need for conservation on an ongoing basis. And water efficiencies we have built in, and I encourage us to continue them with reduction of improved water toilets, water closets, and reduced flows, and maybe better analysis of our use. So mine is a fundamental vote, and it will continue to be not to support the plan as developed by our staff. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Director Wade. Any other directors?
I will be voting for it. I would say I don't fundamentally disagree with Director Wade. However, I think he misses some points of the value of what we're doing. Politically, where we live, I mean, this is not Texas. This is not Midwest. We are in California. We are in the Bay Area of California. I will comment on that even again later. This is what we have to do. And I think the staff's done a great job. I still question the hot water on demand. I can't get my arms around that one to why it didn't pencil out. But regardless, I take it for what it is. I will be supporting it. I think this is what we have to do. We can't all agree on, what use of water is. Some people still feel that flushing water out the bay is wasted water. There's debate on that. So with that, I'll be just supporting it.
Thank you, Director Gunther. Any other directors want to make a comment or ask a question? Hearing none, I just want to thank all staff who put together this presentation. I kind of echo Director Gunther's sentiment, Director Gunther and Director Sethi's sentiments. I'm very appreciative of the work that we've put in here. I think there's a lot of interest within our community to see us move in this direction and offer these rebates and kind of have the strategy behind us. So thank you to all of staff and thank you, Ms. Nevins, for an excellent presentation tonight. I'll open it up now to, I also just wanted to clarify just from a procedural point of view, there is no vote taking place tonight.
Correct, no board action.
This is just an informational item.
Correct, and as Ms. Nevins indicated, if board members have specific comments that they would like to make regarding the report, staff stands ready to accept those and address them.
If I could add one quick comment, multi-metering of multifamily is something I believe is as a sound policy, and particularly if we can adjust our rate structure for those uses that properly split the commodity cost versus the fixed cost. Thank you. I'm sorry to see that.
Are there any members of the public who wish to ask a question or make a comment on this item? Mr. Ken N.
Yeah, thank you, President Akbar. I do have one question, which is really, I believe it is slide 13, the slide that you referred to, the deferred or avoided cost at 1742 per acre foot. In the footnote, it says it's a 2030, 2031 number. Is that really a number that is 10 years in the future, or was that a typographical error? Yeah,
sorry, I was muted. This is a slide that you're talking about.
So in footnote number 3, you refer to the avoided cost of water as $1,742 an acre foot.
Mm-hmm.
Is that really a 2030 number, or is that a 2020 number?
That is what it's estimated to be in 2030.
Okay. And what is the estimated inflation rate?
The inflation rate in the model is hold on. I believe it's 3%.
Okay, yeah, that's what I was guessing. I'm just trying to correlate that number with the number that is in the rate analysis document from Raftellus, and also the comment made by Director Weed. So at this point, that's all the information I need. Thank you.
Right. If I could ask us to focus on the slide for one moment and notice the cost benefit analysis, which is, I believe, relatively true. I may object to the absolute numbers. And strategy A is far more cost effective, benefit cost ratio higher than the other two strategies.
Thank you for those comments. Hearing no more comments from members of the board or the public, I think we can conclude item 6.3.2. Thank you very much. And we will now move on to item 6.4.1, update on the COVID-19 pandemic. And I believe our general manager will take this one.
Yes, thank you, President Akbari. This is just a brief report, not as comprehensive, and no PowerPoint presentations, because I only have a few highlights that I would like to share. Number one, President Biden signed the American Rescue Plan this evening, or actually earlier today. And we're not quite sure, it's voluminous legislation, how this could impact ACWD, but staff is reviewing it, specifically related to, as you recall, the board approved some enhanced benefits from the CARES Act. And we need to see if this particular new law impacts us in any way? And if so, will we need to bring something back to the board, perhaps to either clean up inconsistencies to make sure that board policy reflects, the legal landscape, as well as how we're dealing with employee issues. So I just wanted to mention that staff will be we'll be doing a comprehensive review, and then as needed, we'll consult with the board. Second thing is in terms of the district's number of COVID-19 positives, we're at currently a total of 15, which is +1 from the previous month. And things seem relatively stable, although, COVID-19 and the various variants of it still exist out there and can impact anybody at any time. So we are still employing all the safety features that we have. Thirdly, vaccinations. You may have heard that some states are experiencing surplus already and have therefore opened up vaccinations to any adult that would like one. My understanding is President Biden either has or will direct states to make vaccinations available to all adults on May 1st. Interestingly, there seems to be some loosening up in the county determination of what groups can qualify for Tier 1B. So staff continues to have conversations with the county and others, and there may be opportunities for us to allow or to send ACWD employees or to allow ACWD employees to sign up and get vaccinated. And as I've indicated before, we would prioritize employees that must report to work as the highest priority. Close to that is employees that are reporting to work for various reasons, because we don't want them to impact the employees that must report to work, and then opening up further from that point. So if there is any new news to share on that front, I will share it with the board as well. But I am encouraged by events over the last couple of days, which indicate that we may have more access to vaccinations faster than what I was originally thinking. So, and obviously it is in the best interest of ACWD to have our employees have access to vaccinations. So with that, unless there are no questions, this concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. Shaver. Are there any directors who wish to ask a question or make a comment? Hearing none, I will open it up to the public. Any questions or comments? Hearing none. Are there any other general managers reports?
I'm looking at exec staff and I see no heads nodding up and down, so we have no other information to share with you.
Wonderful. Okay, let us move on to item 7.1, report from directors Gunther and Weed on the February 21st, 2021 Association of California Water Agencies, Washington, D.C. conference. Who would like to start us off?
I guess I could start off. I actually, the Zoom attendance, it brings the mileage a whole lot closer. I'll be honest, I was disappointed. The partisanship is phenomenal. I don't know, maybe because we weren't there. I just found it to be disheartening. I don't see people trying to work together. Democrats talking as if we're all, we have terrible social justice problems and environmental issues. And, I don't see them helping our situation at all. I don't know. I'm hoping they see some of our problems. But the proof will be later. I was disappointed with listening to almost everybody. And I hope that somehow they'll be able to work together. Not sure. Yeah, not sure.
All right. This meeting was a webinar, or a Zoom meeting actually, and really allowed, I believe, about 8 or 9 congressmen to come in and talk to the water community. Generally a one-way conversation. It covered the issues and concerns of a number of congressional people. For those of us who signed up for this, it comes with 3 additional webinars on Wednesday, March the 17th, 24th, and 31st, which will get into specific subject matters. But the meeting itself was the same general rhetoric with nothing, no bombshells, no announcements, and but a reiteration of what we've, of the positions of each of the individual representatives, and all from California.
Can I ask a question of both directors? Was there any discussion about raising the height of Shasta Lake Dam, which Feinstein has been backing?
It was supported by, I believe, Lamarfa is a rice farmer who has the congressional district in the top of the state. It was not in the frame of reference to the other representatives.
Yeah, I kind of came away with the same perspective that the other representatives, yeah, disappointing.
The reason I ask is that it seemed to be gaining some momentum under the Trump administration, and with Feinstein's backing, I thought it might get through. So I was wondering about what the status is right now. But I guess we'll find out at a future Aqua conference.
Yeah, a number of the representatives talked about sites, and particularly Martha, and sites itself may be tied in because of the fish issue with Shasta and the amount of waters that have to be released and what other waters are available. But now that sites is probably not economically viable because of 75% of the water must go for public benefit. We'll see. Now, who's going to pay the bill?
Thank you for those comments. Are there any other directors' comments, reports on meetings attended, or agenda item requests? Hearing none, I will just mention that I did. Yes.
A quick one. I attended a workshop with the San Francisco PUC on the voluntary agreements and unimpaired flows. And a remarkable graph, a chart there, showed that for the past 25 years on the San Joaquin River, there has been no correlation between fish counts and flows. None. And they attributed that to 2 possible issues. One, a change in the chemistry of the water, but more likely the fish hatcheries, particularly at the mouth of the Mokelumne. And that has disrupted the normal relationship between fish and flows. But it's ironic that we're all of this interest and concern over a circumstance that has not existed for the past 25 years, which is flows related to fish. I was also noted in an earlier meeting that 2017 was record flows and a dramatic decline in Delta smelt. So even there, we're not seeing the historic correlation between fish and flows.
Director Akbari,
Yes.
as you read us into closed session, I'd like to request a break for a little while.
Yes, no, I was planning on that. Let me just make one quick comment while we're on director's comments. So I did attend a COVID-19 briefing hosted by the Alameda County Department of Public Health that was on February 17th, and I passed along my notes to the general manager. With that, we will move into item 8, closed session. Item 8.1, pursuant to Government Code Section 54957, threat to public services or facilities, consultation with Manager of Engineering and Technology Services, Manager of Operations and Maintenance, and General Counsel. Item 8.2, pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiators. Agency designated negotiators are Robert Shaver, Jennifer Solito, Jonathan Wunderlich, and Stacy Q. And the employee organizations are the Operating Engineers Local 3 and ACWD Operators Association. Item 8.3, pursuant to California Government Code Section 54956.9D1, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation. The name of the case is the Bonnie Kessner and Andrea McCartney Page individually and on behalf of all others similarly situated and on behalf of the general public et al. Versus the City of Santa Clara et al. Case number 20CV364054. And with that, I will ask our district secretary to move us into closed session, please.
Okay.
Perfect. All right. It is 9:53 and the board is reconvening out of closed session into open session. We discussed items 8.1 through 8.3. Item 8.1, pursuant to Government Code Section 54957, threat to public services or facilities, consultation with Manager of Engineering and Technology Services, Manager of Operations and Maintenance, and General Counsel. No action was taken on this item. Item 8.2, pursuant to California Government Code Section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiators. Agency designated negotiators are Robert Shaver, Jennifer Solito, Jonathan Wunderlich, and Stacy Q. And the employee organizations are the Operating Engineers Local 3 and ACWD Operators Association. And on this item, direction was given to the negotiators. And on item 8.3, pursuant to California Government Code Section 54956.9D1, conference with legal counsel, existing litigation, name of case Bonnie Kessner and Andrea McCartney Page, individually and on behalf of all others similarly situated, and on behalf of the general public et al. Versus the City of Santa Clara et al. Case number 20CV364054, and no action was taken on this item. And with that, we will adjourn the meeting tonight at 9:55. Thank you, everyone.